Hello, good morning. It's Imogen here with Body Intelligence, and I am here with my guest again, Shay Seaborne. And today we are going to talk about the concept of allostatic load and how stresses pile up. And just to briefly introduce Shay, um, um, she has been a client of mine for several years now. She's become a very good friend, and we have started collaborating over this last year to bring workshops about to help people dealing with stress and trauma. Shay herself is a trauma awareness activist, trauma survivor, and welcome, Shay. And she brings a wealth of knowledge about the neuroscience and neurobiology of trauma to the conversation, as well as her personal experience. Welcome.
Thank you.
You're welcome. We're slightly late starting this morning, just a little hiccup there. But why don't we start off just by defining the terms that we're using? Can you give us a definition of allostatic load? What does it mean?
Yes, allostatic load is basically the wear and tear on the body caused by repeat or chronic stress or trauma. And it's cumulative and compounded unless we can mitigate the damage in between. It also can result in permanently altered brain structure, like mine. You don't want that. So the idea is to understand it and deal with it consciously before it basically destroys your health and life. And it accumulates through daily pressures, especially in our culture. We're all under heavy demands to produce and perform and show up and hack our biology, which I don't think is really a good idea. I think we should understand our biology and actually work with it and build our lives around what our bodies need, rather than trying to make our bodies adapt to an environment that's inherently dangerous.
Not just kind of conform in a way that really isn't adaptive, right? So,
Right.
yeah. So, can you give some examples of how this might build up for someone? Because I think the idea is it's not necessarily just one thing. It's that in many parts of your life, there's pressures and that.
Right. Yeah, that's the problem. One of the best illustrations I've seen of allostatic load is somebody holding their arms out with snowballs in them, and the snowballs just keep piling up until you can't even see the person's face anymore. That's a really good image. And the thing is, we need to get rid of some of those snowballs before they pile up. So we can do that through a variety of things. Basically, there are two kinds of stressors. There's the kind that's on your body due to illness or even just daily living. It's normal to have stress, but it's also normal to get out of that stress. And when it's chronic, then it starts loading up. And I forgot where I was going with that. Sorry.
How they build up, and so that there's the ones in the body, and then I'm presuming there's all sorts of outside pressures and factors.
Environmental factors. Well, one of the interesting things to me is that animals that have been in a life-threatening situation, like you've seen the videos of the lion catching the zebra, and maybe the zebra freezes and collapses, and the lion thinks that the zebra is dead, and maybe goes and whatever, gets a drink or something, and the zebra gets up and runs off, and then it stops when it's in a safe place and it shakes itself. We see dogs do that a lot. It shakes itself kind of violently, and that literally shakes off the trauma. And all animals, mammals, will do this, except for those in captivity and human beings.
Interesting. And I've read something about that. It's like, yeah, that's the stress has a kind of cycle, and that's completing it and
Hmm.
getting rid of it. And we don't necessarily have to shake, but there are similar type things that we can do.
Hmm.
And I believe physical activity
Right.
is a really
Big one.
good one
Yes.
because it's very kind of primal.
Hmm.
But it's not the only
Yeah.
thing.
In a situation, where we are actually in threat of death, it would be great if we could shake it off, and
Mm-hmm.
we can learn how to do that. It's been unlearned through our domestication. Um,
It's
uh,
interesting you just said shake it off, and that's a, a term, a phrase that we
mhm.
use, a kind of, but it's often used in a very flippant way. Oh, just shake it off, which is not really helpful.
No.
um,
Yes,
um,
it's a dismissive. Yeah.
yeah,
Don't
yeah,
have that stress, just shake it off.
yeah,
Well, imagine, if every time you felt that kind of stress, you actually did stop and shake it off. People would think you're crazy,
yeah,
because
yeah.
that's how our culture is made. It's against actually our having a healthy allostasis. So things we can do to mitigate that are, number one, being aware of the problem and the effects that it has on us. And chronic allostatic load is the source of basically every kind of disease, chronic disease, diabetes, heart problems,
Mm.
um, even osteoporosis, all are rooted in metabolic processes that are affected by the chronic stress.
But too much. Yeah, yeah,
Hmm. So understanding, information and awareness, and also having some practices that you can mindfully use to help diffuse the stress and bring you into your window of tolerance, so the stress doesn't keep loading up.
mm-hmm.
Um, the practices that you teach in body intelligence, that we
Yeah,
teach in our class, are really helpful for this, because you can
yeah.
learn them um, when you're not under particular stress, and go to them when you are, for really instant relief. It's
Mm-hmm.
really remarkable.
Yeah. They're not quite maybe the same as being able to completely shake things off, but they give some relief, and we'll get
Hmm.
a little bit more to that
And also,
forward.
if we're under chronic stress, we're not really being chased by that lion, but our
Mhm.
body thinks that it is. So
Yeah,
if we can get out of that distress frequently, then we're giving our body the break, and it's not going to, continue to be the problem.
right. And I think one of the problems we have in today's world is that it's not a one-off instance. I mean, there can be one-off instances,
Hmm.
but a lot of this load that people are under, the pileup, is that there's the ongoing pressure at work, to
Hmm.
deadlines and annoying coworker,
Hmm.
um, um, uh,
Yeah,
t-
being a parent with a working parent, employed
working
parent,
parent,
even
you know,
yeah.
just all the places we've got to be, and the pressure of a kind of our culture to be doing,
Hmm.
and the financial pressures.
Hmm.
um I mean, the list
And then there are also
goes.
cultural pressures,
Yes.
like we were talking about earlier, that allostatic load is often higher in people who are marginalized by our culture. So, women, minorities, disabled people all have uh, higher stresses, because the culture doesn't support them.
Yeah, so I'm thinking for women in particular, there's loads of studies that say that show that the amount of, in quotes, unpaid work that
Mm.
women do is so much greater than men. So that would add to their, it's literally adding to their
Mhm.
workload, but it's adding to their stress level. There's
Right.
all these extra things that you have to do on top of
Hmm.
going to work.
And underlying that is the stress of trying to plan it all out. When I was a single parent with an underwater mortgage and a job, every minute was like planning, okay, I'm on my way home from work now. I gotta, stop at the store and buy all these things, and then when I get home I need to change the cat litter because it's trash night and get the trash out. And just like that management adds a
Yeah.
lot of stress load. And when
Yeah.
you
And
have more challenges and you are marginalized, you have to manage more because you're swimming
right.
upstream.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I'm sure I've heard that there's studies that shown that women typically, obviously we're talking in generalizations, but women often bear the brunt of that kind of mental load, like you were describing.
Mhm.
And obviously, as a single parent, that's obvious. But even within a kind of um, a, a, a normal, in quotes, household with partners, that the woman often has the greater kind of mental load for
Mhm.
organizing and making sure and keeping track, and
We
in a
still haven't
way that,
shaken those traditions that
yeah,
are
yeah,
actually really divisive and hard for. It really divides us both and takes the responsibility off one person and puts it on the other, and
yeah.
that affects the relationship as well as the whole family dynamic.
Mm. Yeah, so we kind of started talking about what we can do to mitigate
Hmm.
these things.
Yeah.
Obviously, if we can change something in how much we do and what we do, that's great.
Hmm.
And that's also not always or even often possible. You
Right. Yeah.
know,
You still
there's
have
a
to go to work or and pay the bills
we
and
need
all
the
those
money.
things.
I've got a
Yes.
family to take care of. I've still
Right.
got, there might be some little things within that that could change a bit,
Hmm.
but there's still things that you can do um, to shake it off, in quotes,
Right. Yeah. One
just
of
a
the
little bit. Yeah.
one of the most important things is take a really hard look at your life and what the stressors are, and evaluate what they bring into your life and whether they're worth it to keep in your life. And this
Hmm.
could be, particularly toxic work environment, or uh, a relative who's problematic, always looking for drama. It could be even your healthcare providers who don't listen to you. All of those things can be really hard on the nervous system, and it's really important to rule out those things, like get rid of as many of those things as possible. People, places, things,
Yeah.
news, anything that is uh, aggravating your
Yeah.
nervous system and bringing you out of your window of tolerance. You really need to look at it and change whatever you can. Also, sleep hygiene is really important. Getting good sleep can really reduce the effects of allostatic load, and so many of us don't have good sleep hygiene because of the stresses. So
Yeah.
even just focusing on better sleep hygiene can help reduce the allostatic load.
Yeah, I'm thinking what you just said, just the simple act. If you really look at all the activities and deadlines you have, and you can't see anything that you can get rid of, and yet you are listening to the news, and that, just taking that added piece away could make a huge difference. And I feel like that could probably help with your sleep. um,
Mm-hmm.
so it could, sometimes a little tweak can have um, it's not going to change everything, but it can have a really helpful impact on how you
Mm-hmm.
feel.
And a lot of times we tend to, in our culture especially, tells us, oh, if you're stressed and burned out, you need to take a bubble bath or something, like it's
Hmm.
all on you. But
Hmm.
really, we need to remember that our environment has a lot to do with how much stress we're under.
Yeah,
So changing the environment any way that you can improve it is really important.
yeah, yeah. Um, and so I think it's both and, right? There's
Hmm.
things we can do with ourselves, and I think when we can have a moment of quiet, it helps us be able to see what's going on in the environment a little bit better, that we might be able to
Yes.
make some changes. And I think that's where some of the practices that we teach in our foundations of regulation, which is about helping people regulate their nervous system, which would help them lessen their allostatic load. Is that the right
Mhm.
way to? I
Mhm.
want to make sure I'm using the term correctly, but basically it means you're lessening the load of the stresses that pile up, even
Mhm.
just a little bit. And I think
Yeah.
what we've learned is a little bit is really, really important, especially if you can repeat that little bit
Right.
often.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
The idea with these practices ultimately is to give our nervous systems a break from all the stress,
Mhm.
so that we can come back to our center, to our calm place, to our window of tolerance, and not be stuck in an accelerated pace and an emergency mode.
Mhm.
Um, and as I've said many times, not getting stuck is the important part. Being able to
Yeah.
be fluid and move through that is
Yeah.
where the health is.
Yeah, and what I'd like to say, because we've talked about these stresses that we've talked about, that the load that many of us are under every day they're ongoing.
Mm-hmm.
And so having ways that you relieve that and release that, even just a little bit, but regularly and often in a very easy, sustainable way, I think is hugely important. So yeah.
It can make all
Um,
the difference.
So, anything else you want to kind of add about this subject before we finish up today?
Well, it's really important to understand that allostatic load isn't just about how you feel inside and how anxious you might be. It really affects your entire body, because
Mm,
when you're under stress, all these hormones and other chemicals go through your body that change your blood flow, um, your response to cold or other
mm,
stimulus, and even affect how your brain functions. As we've talked about, when the nervous system is really jacked up, the access to the prefrontal cortex is reduced. When
right.
you're on flight fight mode or chronic stress mode, you don't have access to the parts of your brain that help you figure things out and make
Hmm.
sense of things, and even be cooperative and pro-social and able to engage with other people. So it's really important to remember that it affects your entire health picture.
Yes, yeah. Thank you. And as we really we kind of explore in the very first class of our course, is that the mind and the body, they're not separate. They're
Mm-hmm.
not. So that if we kind of think of physical health and mental health, that's totally one and the same,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah, neuroscience shows that, and there's so much
Yeah,
evidence in that.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah,
So when we
yeah,
don't have physical health, there is, well, we call it mental health, but really it's nervous system health.
yeah. So, um, yes. So, if anyone's interested, we are going to be teaching this. It's a 4-week online course, 4 90-minute classes. The next course starts on the 15th of November, Tuesdays at 5 p.m. Eastern. Um, and we also have a course in January starting at 11 a.m., I think. So, if you're in European time zone or somewhere else or have a different schedule, there's that option too. Um, yeah, I'll put the link for that below the video. Please get in touch if you have any questions about anything we talked about or the course. We're very happy to get back to you. All right. Thank you.